get my brother.
In the early morning hours of October 3rd, Chicago police responded to a home on South Normal Avenue in Englewood. Inside, they discovered 38-year-old Dewanda Dagen and her partner, 44-year-old Thurmond, both dead from gunshot wounds. A firearm was found between them, and the incident was quickly ruled an apparent murder-suicide. Yet inconsistencies in the forensic findings, conflicting family statements, and missing details in the investigation raised serious questions. Who fired the weapon? Dewanda or Noon? Was this an act of passion, retaliation, or something planned long before that night? As the official record remains unchanged, the evidence tells a story filled with uncertainty. This case revisits the investigation, the unanswered questions, and the continuing efforts by Dewanda's family to uncover the truth behind what really happened inside that Englewood home. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Dewanda Dagen was a 38-year-old woman living in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, an area known for its high crime rate and ongoing socioeconomic challenges. She was part of a close-knit family, with her brother Daniel Dagen later emerging as a vocal advocate for her after her death.
Get with me. 100% my sister was a victim. 100% victim. I'm holding victim paperwork. Victim. My little sister would have called her brother. No matter what. If she chose to do whatever, she'd have called me first. I'm here right now. I just had to do one of the hardest things in my motherfucking life.
Roll right here.
I ain't respond to no
plan.
false narratives. I ain't say nothing. I let them post, make videos, and right now today, guess what I get?
Dewanda was described by those who knew her as a private but kind-hearted woman who cared deeply about her loved ones. On social media, she often shared motivational quotes and messages reflecting resilience and hope, but in the months leading up to her death, her posts hinted at emotional strain and a search for peace. Her residence was modest, located in a densely populated section of Englewood, where community relations were strong despite rising violence. Dewanda's social circle included longtime friends, family, and her partner, Thurmond, with whom she had been in a relationship that reportedly grew tense in the final weeks of her life. Dewanda attended local Chicago schools and worked in service and administrative roles throughout her adult life. Her family described her as responsible and independent, someone who valued stability. Public records and interviews indicate she had no criminal history or known behavioral issues. Family sources suggest she had a few long-term relationships before meeting Thurmond, though none were reported to involve violence or police intervention. Her brother Daniel spoke publicly after her death, saying that Dewanda wasn't the type of person who would ever harm anyone. The family dynamic appeared close. She maintained regular contact with her mother and siblings. She was also known for occasionally caring for relatives' children, a reflection of her nurturing reputation in the family. Those familiar with her described Dewanda as calm and reserved but emotionally expressive when hurt. This background would later shape the perception of whether she could have been capable of violence on the night she died. Thurmond, age 44, was Dewanda's romantic partner at the time of the incident. Public information about him is limited, but he was known within the community as a social and outspoken individual. Reports suggest he had previous relationships before Dewanda, and online discussions claim that he had a history of unfaithfulness, though these remain unverified. Unconfirmed reports circulating after the incident allege that Thurmond was aware of a health condition, specifically HIV, and had not disclosed it to Dewanda. The authenticity of those claims has not been established by authorities, but became a significant element in public speculation. There is no clear record of criminal history linked to Thurmond, though neighbors and acquaintances suggested that the couple's relationship had become tense in its final months. Witnesses described frequent arguments, often loud enough to draw attention, but no police calls or protective orders were confirmed in the weeks before the tragedy. Their relationship appeared to be one of both emotional dependence and volatility. They reportedly lived together, but friends indicated that Dewanda had temporarily left the residence at one point before returning shortly before her death. Englewood, located on Chicago's South Side, has long struggled with high crime rates, limited employment opportunities, and systemic disinvestment. Domestic violence-related incidents are frequent, and many go unresolved due to lack of witnesses or limited police resources. According to public data, Englewood consistently ranks among the city's most violent neighborhoods, with homicide and intimate partner violence rates far exceeding the city average. Police presence in the area is regular, but often reactive rather than preventive. Community members often report slow response times and mistrust of law enforcement. These conditions contribute to underreporting of domestic conflict and reluctance among victims to seek help until escalation occurs. Dewanda and Noon's residence was within a section of Englewood marked by multiple vacant properties and frequent police patrols. Social and economic stressors in such environments often intensify personal disputes, creating conditions in which domestic arguments can escalate quickly. In the months leading up to October 2024, the relationship between Dewanda and Noon appeared increasingly unstable. Social media analysis shows Dewanda posting less frequently and occasionally sharing vague comments about betrayal and truth. Friends recalled her mentioning trust issues but not elaborating. Some online claims state that Dewanda suspected infidelity and had confronted Thurmond about it days before the shooting. Others allege she recently discovered information on his phone that intensified the conflict. There are no confirmed police records of domestic violence between them, but neighbors told reporters that they occasionally heard arguments late at night. The tension seemed to revolve around loyalty, honesty, and alleged health concerns. Whether Dewanda had concrete evidence of betrayal remains unknown, but several reports claim she confided in a close friend about her growing doubts. On the evening of October 2nd, 2024, Dewanda was last seen by neighbors entering the home she shared with Noon. Around 2 a.m. on October 3rd, unverified online posts suggested she may have checked her partner's phone, allegedly discovering messages related to infidelity. By 2:15 to 2:30 a.m., neighbors reported hearing gunshots from the property. At approximately 2:30 a.m., police were dispatched to 6600 South Normal Avenue, where they discovered both Dewanda and Noon suffering from gunshot wounds to the head. A firearm was found beside them. No third person was present, and there were no immediate signs of forced entry. The Chicago Police Department labeled the case an apparent murder-suicide, suggesting that Dewanda shot Noon before turning the weapon on herself. The conclusion was based on preliminary observations, proximity of the gun, lack of outside suspects, and position of the bodies. Local news outlets such as CBS Chicago and Headline repeated this assessment. However, this version was immediately contested by Dewanda's brother, Daniel Dagen, who insisted that she was not the shooter. He asserted that his sister was the victim and demanded that investigators perform a thorough forensic review, including gunshot residue testing and ballistic analysis. The family's request for a reinvestigation has since raised ongoing questions about how quickly police labeled the case and whether evidence was properly analyzed before the murder-suicide conclusion was announced. This background sets the foundation for understanding the broader conflict between the official account and the family's insistence on a different truth, a divide that continues to shape public perception of Dewanda Dagen's case. Officers secured the residence on the 6600 block of South Normal Avenue and began a standard evidence preservation procedure. Items documented and cataloged included a firearm recovered at the scene, multiple spent casings, photographs of the interior and exterior, and forensic swabs from surfaces and both bodies. Investigators photographed body positions, room layout, and any visible signs of disturbance. Chain of custody logs were initiated for the weapon, casings, and all biological samples. Scene personnel logged environmental factors, such as lighting, open doors or windows, and any objects that could indicate a struggle. The Cook County Medical Examiner performed autopsies on both decedents to determine cause and manner of death. The autopsies included external and internal examination, documentation of wound tracks, and collection of tissue samples for toxicology. Medical examiners recorded entry and exit wound details, estimated range of fire where possible, and preserved bullets or fragments recovered during dissection for ballistic comparison. Gunshot residue, GSR, testing was performed on the hands and clothing of both individuals to assess whether either showed trace evidence consistent with recent discharge of firearm. Standard GSR collection methods, adhesive stubs from hands and swabs from clothing, were used and submitted to the forensic laboratory. Toxicology panels were ordered to detect alcohol, common drugs of abuse, and prescription medications that could affect behavior or impairment. Results from toxicology and GSR were scheduled to return after laboratory processing. Forensic teams sought to establish weapon ownership and prior possession history through registration, purchase records, and any traceable serial number data. Investigators queried databases and attempted to locate documentation linking the firearm to either decedent or a third party. Ballistics analysis compared bullets and casings recovered at the scene against a recovered firearm to confirm the tool used. Determining the distance and angle of gunfire was prioritized. Crime scene reconstruction specialists analyzed wound morphology, gunshot residue dispersion, soot and stippling patterns, and bullet trajectories to estimate range and firing positions. These observations informed whether wounds were consistent with self-inflicted shots or an externally delivered shot. Trajectory analysis used measured scene photographs and anatomical wound locations to map likely relative positions of shooter and victim. Time of death estimations by the medical examiner used core body temperature, liver and rigor mortis findings, and comparison with scene timelines, calls to emergency services, witness reports. Combined with phone and utility logs, these estimates narrowed the window during which shots were fired. Fingerprint and DNA analysis were undertaken on the firearm, magazine, and nearby surfaces. Latent prints were lifted where possible. Touch DNA swabs were taken from grip surfaces and the weapon's receiver. Results were cross-checked against state criminal databases and familial references provided by relatives. Phones and digital devices were seized and subjected to forensic imaging to preserve volatile data. Examiners extracted call logs, text messages, messaging app histories, social media direct messages, and recent browser activity. Metadata timestamps were preserved and compared with the estimated time of death to identify contemporaneous exchanges. Investigators searched for communications that could indicate intent to harm, threats, or messages suggestive of a confrontation. Deleted items were targeted with recovery techniques to locate content removed prior to seizure. Location data such as cell tower pings and Wi-Fi associations were collected where available to confirm presence or movement within critical time windows. Any security or doorbell camera footage in adjacent properties was identified and requested. Investigators also sought login activity and recent posts to social accounts to map last public communications and possible motives or disputes. Detectives conducted recorded interviews with immediate family, starting with Dewanda's brother, Daniel, and extending to other relatives who could provide context on the relationship, recent behavior, and potential conflicts. Interviewers documented statements about prior incidents, ownership of weapons, medical conditions, or recent disclosures relevant to motive. Neighbors and witnesses were canvassed for observations, sound of argument, footsteps, vehicle movements, visitors, or anything unusual in the hours preceding the incident. Witness accounts were corroborated against phone metadata and scene evidence where possible. Investigators examined prior police logs to determine whether previous domestic complaints or welfare checks were recorded at the address. The investigation faced immediate evidentiary constraints. There were no independent eyewitnesses inside the residence at the time of the shootings, limiting first-hand reconstruction to physical evidence and device records. Social media narratives emerged quickly, presenting conflicting claims that complicated public understanding and risked contaminating witness recollection. Allegations regarding health status circulated online and in community posts. Those claims, if relevant to motive, require verification through medical records or direct testimony. Such records are protected and not automatically accessible. Investigators noted the risk of unverified health information shaping public and family perception without corroboration. Local news outlets published preliminary reports summarizing police statements. 2 deceased, gun recovered. Incident classified as an apparent murder-suicide. Reports emphasized the time and location, and noted investigators were on scene. Crime scene images and brief summaries circulated via news websites and social platforms. Initial reporting contained limited forensic detail, pending laboratory results and autopsy findings. Within hours, social media posts proposed alternate sequences. Some alleged one party discovered infidelity or a serious health condition and acted violently. Others suggested the public narrative misidentified the shooter. These posts included assertions lacking source documentation and reposts of hearsay. The rapid spread of competing accounts created divergent storylines across blogs, Instagram, TikTok, and private messaging threads. The public discourse split between those accepting the official police statement and those demanding a deeper inquiry. Commentators amplified both versions, and speculation proliferated through community groups and comment threads. Media organizations repeatedly cautioned that early reports were preliminary and subject to change pending forensic confirmation. Family members issued statements challenging the initial framing. Dewanda's brother provided recorded remarks disputing that she would commit such an act and requested further investigation. Relatives urged officials for transparency on forensic results and for any evidence that could clarify the sequence of events. Public appeals for a complete release of autopsy and lab findings were made through family spokespeople. Community leaders and advocacy groups framed the event within local concerns about intimate partner violence and the adequacy of resources for conflict intervention. Vigils and community gatherings were organized to acknowledge the deaths and call for answers. Organizations emphasized due process in the investigation and warned against judgment based solely on unverified online claims. Laboratory analysis of ballistics, GSR, and fingerprints provided the primary objective measures to evaluate the murder-suicide hypothesis. Ballistic matching confirmed whether bullets recovered matched the on-scene firearm. GSR results indicated whether either decedent discharged a weapon shortly before death. Fingerprint or DNA profiles on the weapon aimed to identify who last handled it. Recovered messages and timeline metadata were scrutinized for indicators of motive or contemporaneous conflicts. Analysts focused on deleted content and timestamp conversations leading up to the approximate time of death to reconstruct any confrontation or premeditation. Location metadata and app activity were used to cross-validate witness statements. Autopsy conclusions, entry wound orientation, range indicators, and internal trajectory were compared across both victims to assess consistency with self-infliction or external firing. Toxicology results were integrated to determine impairment levels at death. Time of death estimates were aligned with 911 and other call records to establish a chronological sequence. As forensic results and autopsy reports were completed and released in stages, public narratives adapted. Where forensic markers confirmed or contradicted early assertions, commentators revised positions. Where ambiguity persisted, speculation continued. Law enforcement maintained limited public commentary until conclusive laboratory findings and medical examiner determinations were finalized. In Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, the early hours of October 3rd began like any other until a call to 911 shattered the quiet. Inside a modest brick home on South Normal Avenue, officers discovered 38-year-old Dewanda Dagen and her partner, 44-year-old Thurmond, both dead from gunshot wounds to the head. A single firearm lay between them. Within hours, police labeled it an apparent murder-suicide, but the certainty of that conclusion would soon be challenged. For investigators, family members, and the public, a series of difficult questions emerged. Who truly fired the weapon? What drove the confrontation? Was this act of violence rooted in jealousy, betrayal, or desperation, or was something else concealed beneath the surface? Forensic teams examined residue, fingerprints, and trajectories. Gunshot residue tests were run on both victims. Investigators reviewed call logs, texts, and social media exchanges for clues about intent. Autopsy reports established time and angle of death, but critical data about firearm handling and gun ownership remained inconclusive. These uncertainties opened the door to doubt. Family members quickly disputed the official report. Dewanda's brother, Daniel, asserted publicly that his sister was not the shooter but the victim, insisting she had no history of violence or instability. He petitioned the department to reopen the case, emphasizing her reputation as a devoted, responsible woman. The media began to cover the story more closely, amplifying contrasting accounts and online speculation. Digital evidence offered potential insight. Messages retrieved from both victims' phones revealed rising tension. Rumors circulated that Dewanda had discovered infidelity or a health disclosure that triggered an argument. Yet, with no surviving witnesses, the interpretation of these messages remained speculative. Forensic specialists continue to debate whether the fatal shots could align with murder-suicide scenario or a double homicide staged to appear that way. The broader context added complexity. In Englewood, domestic violence incidents were both frequent and under-investigated. Chicago's rates of intimate partner homicides had increased that year, often closing with minimal public detail when both partners died. Experts noted that when two individuals perish in the same incident, the surviving narrative frequently defaults to one explanation, murder-suicide, without independent corroboration. Community members demanded answers. Advocates pointed to systemic flaws, limited domestic violence prevention resources, weak mental health support, and mistrust between residents and law enforcement. These social conditions, they argued, often left warning signs unnoticed. Others drew attention to stigmas around HIV disclosure and emotional betrayal, speculating that such stressors might have influenced the events leading to the tragedy. Despite official silence, online conversation intensified. Some accounts portrayed Dewanda as a woman pushed to the edge by betrayal. Others painted her as a victim of retaliation. The absence of a public forensic summary allowed misinformation to fill the void. Independent bloggers, local activists, and journalists each attempted to reconstruct the truth, but contradictions persisted. Months later, the case remained officially classified as a murder-suicide. No new evidence had been released, and the weapons chain of custody was still unclear. Dewanda's family continued to seek a reevaluation, arguing that key forensic data, such as DNA on the gun's trigger and grip, should be retested. They cited inconsistencies in wound trajectories and the absence of a conclusive gunshot residue match. Vigils were held in Dewanda's memory. Local domestic violence organizations used her story to highlight how easily truth can blur when both parties die. They also stressed the impact of early assumptions on families seeking closure. The Dewanda Dagen case encapsulates recurring investigative pitfalls in domestic violence deaths, reliance on circumstantial inference, scarce forensic transparency, and the influence of societal bias. Without witnesses, every clue becomes interpretive. To this day, lingering questions remain. Who actually pulled the trigger? Was this act impulsive or planned? Did health, betrayal, or desperation play the decisive role? And did confirmation bias cause investigators to accept the simplest narrative too quickly? As the years pass, 6600 South Normal Avenue stands silent, a reminder a night defined not only by tragedy, but by the unresolved search for certainty. Beneath every official label, murder, suicide, victim, perpetrator, lies a story of complexity, secrecy, and unanswered truth. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.